For more on this, we are now joined by Dr. Adam Day, head of the Geneva office of United Nations University Center for Policy Research. Dr. Adam Day also served as political advisor in UN missions in Sudan, South Sudan, Lebanon, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Welcome, Dr. Adam, to the broadcast.
Thanks, Crispino. It's good to be on your show.
Israel says its main aim is to eliminate Hamas and local Palestinians are not the target. In fact, they had dropped flyers earlier asking Gazans in the north to flee to the south earlier in the war. Before moving in, United Nations repeatedly warned of a humanitarian crisis as a result of the war. What kind of message is Israel sending out, given the fact that South Africa has accused the country of genocide, which has come up at The Hague?
I think the main message right now is that they're not finished yet. If you think of the three objectives that Israel has, it's destroying Hamas's leadership, eliminating the infrastructure in Gaza, and getting the hostages back. With only a third of the hostages back, many Hamas leaders still around, and the infrastructure is still present in both the north and the south. I think the real message is we're not finished yet, and I would anticipate an increase in intensification of the conflict in the south in the coming period as they start to focus more on where they think the Hamas leadership and the hostages are. But I don't think it's over in the north either. And I don't think that the north is a safe place to go back to yet. Philippe Lazzarini, the head of the UN Relief and Works Agency, said that much of that part of Gaza is not habitable. And so I think we're in a place where the message really is that we're still in the intense period of military operations, and there isn't really a vision for that day after that you mentioned a bit earlier in the program.
Absolutely. In fact, the United Nations Humanitarian Office has also accused Israel of blocking its efforts to send aid to the north recently. This is in fact a very serious accusation. And how do you view the aid being delivered since the beginning of the war?
Yeah, I heard the UN officials, the Office of the Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs, referred to a systematic refusal by Israeli officials to allow aid into hospitals in the north. The Israeli side has rejected that and said that it's a logistical issue. I think the reality is 500 or so trucks are needed per day into Gaza, and fewer than 200 are getting in. And I think certainly the message from the UN side is if the obstacles were removed, we could get much closer to that 500 trucks. And so I think one of the key things that happened early this week was the beginning of the mandate for Sigrid Kaag, who is the Senior Humanitarian and Reconstruction Coordinator for the UN. I think her role is going to be really critical in unlocking some of those blockages, in making sure there's consistent pressure on the Israeli military to allow that aid in. But as of right now, I think the message from the UN side is the aid is not being allowed in anywhere near at the accelerated rate that it's needed to meet those needs of the 2.3 million Gazans.
You're right, Dr. Adam, because even Netanyahu is unfazed by external advice, especially from the United Nations. And one of the biggest casualties that we have seen in this war, women and children in Gaza. According to the health ministry in Gaza, around 23,843 people have been killed, including around 10,000 children, while more than 60,000 people are wounded. And many have accused Israel and its leaders of being indifferent. What is your opinion on this?
Well, I think, first of all, just to recognize the enormous tragedy of losing an average of 300 people per day for 100 days. And I think it's worth pausing on that. I think the challenge is that there's a huge amount of daylight between the actors involved in finding a way out of this. And it may sound callous to one actor or unrealistic to another, but really the messages that Blinken was giving to the regional actors and to Israel were to slow down the invasion and to allow better protection of civilians to happen. I don't think that he succeeded in landing those messages with the Israeli side. And I also don't think that his mission was a success in getting the regional actors to agree to take a more active role in that day after. So then we're left in this situation where Netanyahu is saying, we're not done with our military phase of this yet. We haven't accomplished that yet. And we're going to keep doing that no matter what happens in The Hague or elsewhere. But we don't have that transition process. And so I think we're still, even after Blinken's extraordinary 10-country visit, I think we're in a place where we don't see how to move out of this phase of the invasion. And unfortunately, I think it means that Netanyahu doesn't have another set of messages that he's willing to give right now about how to move into a phase where Palestinians can return home. I'm not even sure if certain members of his government are ready to say that they should be allowed to return home yet. And that really leaves the 2 million Gazans in an impossible situation right now, and in a very vulnerable one, where not only from a humanitarian standpoint, but from a protection of from the continuous bombing,
Yes.
I don't see that ending.
And we will also have to see how the war spills in the region. We'll be tracking all those developments very closely. 100 days into the Israel-Hamas war. Dr. Adam, thank you for joining us on the broadcast.
Thank you, Crispino.